بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Inshallah, in today's talk, we'll talk about, in the Seerah session, we'll talk about how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam built the society in Madinah. So we talked about in previous week's talk, the first, as we talked about, there are three phases in the Madinah life. You can divide into, within those three phases, we are on the first phase right now, and we talked about how the people were divided in Madinah when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Madinah. What I mean by division was there were mushrikeen over there, polytheists. There were Jews, Jewish tribes were there in Madinah, and as well as the Muslims. And within the Muslims, we had two categories: Al-Ansar and Al-Muhajirin. Now, within the mushrikeen, later on, there was another category came out, which were the hypocrites. So we can think of it as if there were about four categories. You can say three. So that was as far as the kind of people who were in Medina. Then a little bit we talk about the life what's the difference between the life of the Sahaba in Mecca and Medina. Mecca was a life where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Sahaba were living under the Jahiliyyah system. And then when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina, now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the one who had the authority. He is the one who had the ruling, and Medina was ruled by Islam now. Now, we talked about the Quran was revealed gradually, but when it comes to implementation, whatever the ahkam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were there, they were all implemented at the same time. So it's not like Rasulullah and Sahaba had the rulings from Islam and they were implementing them gradually. No, it was not like that. Rather, as any new situation was coming up, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealing through the wahi to Rasulullah, whether in the form of the Quran or the Sunnah, as we talked about multiple times, that both Quran and Sunnah are forms of wahi, revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is not called gradual implementation of deen. It means that the rulings or the Quran was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a gradual manner. Yeah, and we talked about, for example of alcohol or intoxicants, that even though that it feels to some people that as if the rulings of alcohol or intoxicants came out in a gradual manner, but in reality, it was only once when the ruling regarding the intoxicant or the khamr being haram came, and at that point, Sahaba right away they stopped drinking. And some of the reports talk about they used to drink so much that when they broke all the pots, whatever they were carrying the alcohol or the khamr, it was like as if the river of intoxicant was flowing in the streets of the Medina. That much they used to drink. And we're talking about Sahaba because it was halal at that point. And once it became haram, right away they destroyed whatever they had. Okay, then we talked a bit about polytheists living in Medina and the types of Jews living in Medina, and a couple of incidents about the Jews and how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the interaction with the Jews the moment Rasulullah entered into Quba and then to Medina, and their response to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was quite negative, but some of them, of course, were positive, like Abdullah bin Salam radiallahu anhu, who was one of the rabbis or one of the scholars of the Jews, and he was very positive about what Rasulullah brought to him, and he accepted Islam right away when he met Rasulullah. Now today inshallah we'll talk about how the new society was built in Medina. As we talked about that, the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived in Medina on Friday the 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, which was, we can call it as the first year after Hijrah. Of course, that at that time there was no calendar. The calendar was from in the time of Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu an, but it was counted from the time of Hijrah. And we talked about this a little bit before when we were talking about the importance of the Hijrah as well, that Hijrah is such an important event that not only that the life of Rasulullah is divided into two parts, but even the Quran is divided into two parts. As we know that the Quranic surahs that we talk about, that they always have, if you read them, on the top of it, it says Makkiyah or Madaniyah. Or yeah? Meaning, the one that was revealed not in the Makkah, because Makki means the era of the Makkah. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, that's a time prior to migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because those surahs could be, they revealed outside of Makkah, but we still call them as Makkiyah. And same thing, those surahs, they were revealed after the migration of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Medina. They might have revealed in Mecca, but we still call them Madani. The reason is that's the era that matters. It's not the time and place when we talk about the division of the Quran from that perspective. Because the tone of the Quran completely changed from Makki to Madani era. Because in the Mecca, you will see the ayat in general talk like this, Ya ayyuhan nas, all people. The address is the people. When it came to Medina, the ayat, the tone changed now. Most of them start like this, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, O you who believe, referring to. And the Sahaba used to say that whenever an ayah says Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, it means there is either hukum is coming, meaning some order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, amr is coming, or nawahi, meaning prohibition is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they used to pay attention right away. If the ayah says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, okay, there is some command coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, because the Medina era was where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam now was a sole ruler, and he was implementing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the difference. Now, in the new society where Rasulullah came to Medina, the very first thing that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did in Medina was he built a masjid. As we kind of talk about, hinted it last week, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decided to build a masjid where the camel of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stopped and knelt down, and that's the place the Rasulullah commanded to build a masjid, and that land belonged to orphans, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam purchased that land from those orphans, and then the cleanup process started. But when they were building the masjid, the way it was built was the nearby rooms next to the masjid were reserved for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's household, and Rasulullah himself was part of building the masjid. He used to carry the bricks and the stones, whatever was needed to build the masjid, and along with the Sahaba. It was not like sometimes we see today that when you think of a ruler, you don't think a ruler will be doing things like this with the labor class, so-called. There's a class system exists today, and people look down at the people, unfortunately, if somebody does not have wealth or something, or a homeless person, and on and on. Of course, Islamically, we don't look at this way. Yeah, the person who has more ikram, the one who is more honorable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the one who has the taqwa. It has nothing to do with the wealth. It has nothing to do with your health, wealth, or your family, what you belong to. It's only the righteousness, meaning the consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even here, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was showing with the example here. He himself was participating in the building of the masjid. He was carrying the bricks and the stones along with the rest of the Sahaba. Now, and when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was building Rasulullah was reciting these kind of verses. Rasulullah was saying that Allahumma la aisha illa aisha al-akhirah. That there is no blessing, or there is no bliss except in the akhirah, in the day of judgment. And Rasulullah was also saying, one of the hadith reported in Muslim, they say, Allahumma la aisha la aishu al-akhirah fa akrim al-ansar wal-muhajira. Rasulullah was making a dua for the Ansar and the Muhajirin, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honor them on the day of the judgment. Okay, and then of course when the masjid was built, now the issue came up that how to call the people towards Salah. They used to just gather for Salah before, And they would gather for salah and then wait for the right time. And then they would do the salah. Now, that was in the beginning. Now, Rasulullah ﷺ was asking the Sahaba about their opinion on how to take care of that. Some of them said, why don't we do like Christians? That we can have a naqus, or naqus is a bell, that you can ring the bell and call the people towards salah. Okay? And then, or it could be like a horn by the Jews. And then Umar al-Khattab was the first one, as one of the hadith says, he was the first one who suggested that a man should call the people for the prayer. And Rasulullah ﷺ ordered the Bilal, and he asked him to get up and give the adhan. Now, there is difference of opinion about this subject, that who was the one who came up with it. There's some other reports that talk about that it was Abdullah bin Zayd, radiallahu anh, is the one who saw the dream. And because there are different narrations, it could be both of them who came to Rasulullah ﷺ. They both were shown the dream from Allah Azza wa Jal, how to call for the prayers. And then Rasulullah ﷺ is the one who accepted it. Now this is a principle to remember. When Rasulullah ﷺ was presented something, it's not that Rasulullah ﷺ is the one who's presenting the adhan here, right? So when he is presented something, or an action is done in front of Rasulullah ﷺ, and he approves an action, that means that action is the sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ now. Okay, remember we talked about in the past, there are three different categories of the sunnah. One is the actions of Rasulullah ﷺ, one are the sayings of Rasulullah ﷺ, and third one is, if an action is performed in front of Rasulullah ﷺ, and he approves that action, he accepts the action. So that action itself becomes the sunnah, because Rasulullah ﷺ, he accepted the action, otherwise he would have said something against it if it was something which is not acceptable in Islam. So that becomes part of the wahi from the perspective of this is approval coming from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not say things from his own desires. وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not say anything from his desires. Whatever he says, it is from the wahi that was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, interesting part about the Masjid Nabawi that was built, unlike today, which masajid have normally become as a place for salah, for example, or only maximum you can have some lectures, or something just related to ruhaniya or spirituality. Besides that, we don't imagine that masjid is more than that. What in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, masjid was not just a place for salah, especially Masjid al-Nabawi. We don't see that Masjid al-Nabawi was just a place for salah. We say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was teaching over there to Sahaba. They used to gather. Of course, they used to pray. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to even resolve the conflicts between the people. Meaning, it was like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a qadi among them. He's a leader, but on top of it, he is a qadi as well. Qadi means he's making judgments between the people according to what Allah revealed. So the conflicts were resolved, and then it was used as Baytul Mal as well. Baytul Mal means that it's kind of what you can think of as a treasury. Whatever wealth is coming in, distributed to the people. That was done in the Masjid al-Nabawi as well. So it was the headquarters for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for running all the affairs of the people. So Masjid al-Nabawi was more than today's definition of masjid. Same way, this masjid was used for consultation as well. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do the shura as well. Shura, and he had people from Al-Ansar, from the helpers, and from the Muhajirun, from the immigrants. And these were the ones who had some sort of a leadership among their own people. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to consult them about many things. Now, when we talk about consultation, remember, consultation is not about to decide what is halal and haram. Consultation is about two mubah things, two permissible things from Allah Azza wa Jal, and they would consult that which way to go. Because shura is not the one that decides what is halal and haram. Halal and haram comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not even from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Yeah? Even Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was a messenger. He's not the one who was making halal or haram or halal. Because halal and haram coming through Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam means Rasulullah was getting the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was conveying the message to the people. That includes what is halal and haram. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nabi lima tuharrimu ma halallahu lak. Yeah? O Nabi, O Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why do you make something haram that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it halal? It's another discussion. I will not go now. When it comes, inshallah, I'll talk about that. This is something happened between the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he himself, for himself, he made honey. He said he's not going to eat the honey anymore. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, why are you making something haram which Allah has made it halal? Meaning, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself did not have the right to make halal haram or haram halal. He was just following the message coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a messenger. That's why we say Rasul. Rasul is the one who has the risala from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what Rasul or Nabi does, that he conveys what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded them. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember. When we talk about the masjid, what is a masjid? Masjid is not just a place of thinking of so-called worship in a secular way, thinking of, oh, this is just my ritualistic things that I go and do in the masjid. No, masjid is supposed to be more than just a place for prayers. Yeah? Okay. Now, the brotherhood between the Muslims, this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after building the masjid, he did. Now, another aspect to remember about the building the masjid, if you pay attention to it, throughout the 13 years in Mecca, we don't see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam build any masjid. He did not build any masjid, right? First masjid was built when Rasulullah migrated to Medina, in the Quba. And after Quba, he built the Masjid Nabawi. And the very similar things that we find in the lives of Sahaba also. I was doing some series of talks on the life of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh. When he built the city of Cairo or Baghdad, the first thing that they did always, whenever they're starting off something new, some place they're entering into a place where now Islam is the way, they built the masjid. And then the population started growing around it. Nowadays, it has become other way around. We gather, with the population of the Muslims are there, then we think of a masjid that should be built. We are upside down now when it comes to that kind of the way the Sahaba and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. And hence, it has become more of today, it's more become like a place as, okay, so other religions have their places of worship, so now we have our place of worship. While masjid in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see in the lives of Sahaba, was more than just a place for worship. Yes, it was a place for worship, but besides that, it was utilized for many other things as well. Okay, as a matter of fact, as we talked about, for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Masjid al-Nabawi was the headquarters for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for all the activities that he was doing. Now, when after the masjid was built, and one point I forgot to mention, which was there in the slide, when the Masjid Nabawi was built, so it was the direction of the Masjid Nabawi was in a manner, it was, so the Imam is standing in the direction of the north, because at that time, the Qibla was Masjid al-Aqsa. So the Muslim used to pray in the direction of Masjid al-Aqsa. It was not Masjid al-Haram. It was about 16 or 18 months after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina, the Qibla, the ayat regarding the change of Qibla were revealed. Okay, so now here there were about 90 men from the Muslims that included the Muhajirun and Al-Ansar. They gathered, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was building. He started talking about how to take care of those brothers or those families who migrated from Mecca to Medina. They left everything. They were in destitute, in the poverty situation, because they did not bring anything from Mecca. Now, when they came here, Rasulullah created a brotherhood among them. And that brotherhood was like that they started splitting whatever they had. So the helpers, Ansar, whatever they had, they started splitting them into half. Even the ones who had two wives, they said like this, okay, I'll divorce one, and after the iddah, after the period is passed, you can marry her. And the wealth they were dividing into two, and they can, and this is the kind of brotherhood that was created. And until Ghazwatul Badr happened, they even used to inherit from each other. Until the ahkam regarding inheritance, the rules regarding inheritance were revealed, They used to even inherit from each other. And then the inheritance was done as Allah commanded within the family members, and this is beyond the scope of today's talk, but that's a rule came afterwards. Okay, now one of the examples of this brotherhood was when Sa'ad bin Rabi' and Abdurrahman bin Auf radiallahu anhuma. So there was a brotherhood was created between these two that, okay, so now he will take care of Abdurrahman bin Auf. He came from Makkah. So Sa'ad offered him, and he said, basically, he said, I am the richest man amongst the helpers. I'm glad to share my property half and half with you. I have two wives. I'm ready to divorce one, and after the expiry of her iddah, he says that you can marry her. Now, Abdurrahman bin Auf, radiallahu anh, he refused. It's not that he did not like, he refused and said, just show me the market. Where is the market? I'll go. He was a famous businessman, even in Mecca. He was one of the richest people, but now he's in that situation. And subhanAllah, subhanahu wa ta'ala put so much barakah in his rizq that he very quickly he was able to become successful in the business, and at a very short period of time that he actually got married as well. And when we are talking about getting married is you have to the groom has to pay the mahar, as we know, right? Mahar is we're going to call it dowry. Unfortunately, some of the cultures have things are upside down among the Muslims as well. Some Desis have this culture that women is the one who will be giving the dowry, or jaheez, what they call them, yeah? And this kind of a stuff not only exists in the Desi culture, by the way. Anybody from Egypt here? Okay, nobody? In Egypt also, similar kind of the culture exists in Misr. That the women's side is the one who is giving them dowry to the husband's side, which is not Islamic. Islamic is actually, the man is the one who's supposed to give the mahar. Okay? And it's and this mahar, when we say dowry, again I'm going off subject, yeah? But anyways, even when we talk about dowry, the mahar, in many cultures, it is thought of it as if this is something, you give to the wife when she divorce her. Or when the husband died from his wealth, some of the mahar will be taken out. It's not that way. Whatever the mahar is, mahar must be paid by the husband to the wife, not to the wife's father, not to the wife's brothers. This is the haqq of the wife. He must get it, okay? And that could be a huge amount as well, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not place any limit. Whatever that you guys agree on, that belongs to the wife. And it should be given, and it is like a dain. Dain means it is like a loan that you must pay back. And on the day of judgment, we will be accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we have not paid the dain. Because mahar is like a dain. Yeah? So, the guys here, don't go by any kind of a cultural garbage that exists. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a command for us that must be paid to the wife, okay? That's true that it can be forgiven and all those things if the wives want to, or they can go for a very little amount of mahar also. Again, this is a separate subject, okay? But if there's any question, I'll talk about that later on, inshallah. But then about Abdurrahman bin Auf, I want to talk about something else about him also. One of the hadith which is mentioned in Bukhari, that talks about that Abdurrahman bin Auf came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he had marks of sufra, yellow perfume. Okay? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him about that. What does he have? So he told him that he got married. Okay? And he got married, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, because he just came from Mecca, he started working, doing some business, and he was able to generate enough money that he can give a piece of gold size of the pit of the date. Because someone asked, what did he pay her? And he said equal to the weight of the date stone. And then Rasulullah asked him to give him a wedding banquet. Don't think of a wedding banquet means there has to be thousands of people, or there has to be a very fancy place or something. This is now we're discussing here. Even Rasulullah said, even with one sheep. Okay, it's just more of a announcement to the people. But another interesting aspect here is, look, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the most beloved person for the Sahaba. He did not know Abdurrahman bin Auf got married. He found out after he saw Sufra on him. And it was not considered as something bad that, oh, why didn't you invite me? Like sometimes nowadays people think of from each other. It is expected that how come somebody did not invite us for a wedding or something? And Abdurrahman bin Auf, he got married here. And yes, Rasulullah suggested to them to do the walima. So it will be more publicly known. Well, he was not hiding or anything that wedding. But the point is how simple it was at that time to get married. It is not as complicated as unfortunately we have made it today. Okay, marriage should be an easy thing to be done for both sides, men and the women. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Going on about the brotherhood. So when it comes to generosity of the Ansar, one of the hadith which is mentioned in Bukhari, it says that Abu Hurairah radiallahu an, he's reporting the hadith that Ansar came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we want to divide our nakhil is their orchards or the gardens for the dates between our brothers who came from Mecca as immigrants. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam he said that that's too much, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was reluctant to put this kind of a burden on the Al-Ansar. So he said, okay, how about they will work with you in the fields, and whatever you guys make, that will be split. And this is what they agreed on. And now, see, the Ansar were willing to sacrifice anything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was the situation of the Ansar. And that's because of when they accepted this idea of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, that there is nobody worthy of worship except Allah Azza wa Jal, and Rasulullah is the messenger of Allah. This very same thought pushed them to fulfill any command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something that we should also think about. That when we say that we are Muslim, how do we look at Islam? Do we look at Islam as I am willing to do what Allah wants? Or do we look at Islam as let me see what I can do, what I can do in my free times, or I have to look for some free time for Islam? See, the Sahaba's life, when we look at them, it was other way around. You find everything is revolving around Islam. It was not that Islam is a part-time job for us, or Islam is something, if I get paid, then I will work for Islam. No, Islam is something which is for us, has to come from within us, and the push should come from us that we will do whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. And we should look at Islam from the angle of, okay, what does Allah wants from us? Not what I want to do for Allah. These are two different ways of looking at the very same thing, even though both are producing actions. But the one that is about Muslim, that we are submitting to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning we want to know what Allah wants and then we act upon it. So this was the impact on the Sahaba, on the Ansar, the one who used to be referred as Al-Aws and Khazraj, the one who used to fight with each other for silly things for decades. The very same ones became brothers to each other. The very same ones not only became brothers to each other in Medina, but also the brothers who came from Mecca, the ones they did not even meet before. And as we talked about, many of them did not even meet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam before, until Rasulullah migrated from Mecca to Medina. But this willingness to do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was there. Anything that comes on. Now, okay. Besides that, about the Muslim, and we'll 12:35. Okay. Besides that, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also built relationship between the Muslims and non-Muslims. Okay. Now, this idea of coexistence of Muslims and non-Muslims, this is really, Islam is the one that brought into the world. That how Muslims and non-Muslims can live side by side without any kind of a hatred towards each other or harming each other. Islam is the one that came. And not only that, the non-Muslims who were living under Islam in Medina, and later on this Medina state expanded into multiple continents, we see that it was a must for the Muslims to protect the people who were non-Muslims living under Islam. That was an obligation on the Muslims to protect the even Ahlul Dhimma. Ahlul Dhimma means the people who are under the protection of Islam. Okay, so this is about, and there were mithaq were done between them. There was mithaq is covenants that was done between the Muslims and the non-Muslims and among the Muslims as well. So in the next 5 minutes, I will just show this and kind of skim through this. I will not have time to go over this Charter of Alliance that was done between the Muslims. But the key point is, if you look at that, it says that, referring to the Muslims, this is about the Muslims, right? So Rasulullah ﷺ said that بين المؤمنين والمسلمون مسلمين من قريش ويثرب ومن تبعهم فالحق بهم وجاهد معهم. He's talking about this is the contract between the Muslims who were from the Quraysh or from the Medina. Unfortunately, translations were quite a bit of messed up here. I was having difficult time to correlate both of them. As a matter of fact, it does not even match what the Arabic says and what the English says. Okay, it's good to go back if it's possible to go to the Arabic or find somebody who can translate it for you. Also, some of the things are not accurate enough, but we'll go over just a summary of it. Rasulullah ﷺ very clearly, uniquely made it distinct that this is about the Muslims, and Muslims were referred as a unique nation. Okay, they were different than the non-Muslims. Okay, so it's not that Muslims and non-Muslims are all same. No, Islam very clearly differentiates between Muslims and non-Muslims. Okay, and when we say Muslims or the kuffar, a kafir does not necessarily mean it's a derogatory term. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses a term for the people who are non-Muslims. Okay, so let's not go into this kind of a direction of, we cannot call people kuffar. No, Allah is the one who referred to them as kuffar, who are non-Muslims. Okay, and that includes the mushrikeen and Ahlul Kitab. All of them are referred as the kuffar and the disbelievers. Okay, so Rasulullah ﷺ, when he's making this, the points made here, he's very clearly saying the immigrants and the Quraysh unite together and shall pay, for example, blood money among themselves and shall ransom honorably. Talking about the Muslims will take care of each other. They will not abandon each other. And similarly says, believers shall not leave anyone destitute among them by not paying his redemption money or blood money like this. Blood money is something which is referred as if there is, let's say, there's some sort of one person kills somebody else. Now, in that case, the punishment comes from whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded, which is the qisas here. Now, if there is a situation where the family is willing to forgive the person, meaning forgive in the sense of willing to accept the blood money, then the blood money comes from that person who has committed the action and his family members, or the people around him, which is called the usba. Now, here Rasulullah ﷺ is actually making an alliance, not only the usba of that, but rather that muhajirin and ansar who have this brotherhood, they will help each other out as well. Okay. There's some of the things that are very basic things that a believer should not kill another believer, nor shall support this believer against a believer. Protection of Allah is one and is equally extended to the humblest of the believers. So if even the so-called, if you think of it, one of the poorest one among the Muslims gives protection to somebody, then that will be from all the Muslimin. Okay? That's what he's talking about. And in general, the key thing about this whole charter or Islamic alliance or Mithaq al-Tahaluf al-Islami was that all the Muslims, they will obey Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in all the matters. Okay? In all the matters, they will go back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Islam becomes the center of resolving all sorts of conflicts. It's only by the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal they will resolve the issues. Whether it was now here in Medina or whether it was later on after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, Muslims understood it very well that they have to resolve all their issues by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed and through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whether it's from the Quran or the Sunnah. And of course, from the Quran and Sunnah, we can do the ijma' and the qiyas. These are the extensions of the Quran and Sunnah. But all the things, all the matters must be resolved by Quran and the Sunnah. So I'll leave this for you guys to read from the book directly, inshallah. And if there's any questions, I will answer them next week as well, if there is about this. Or if there is any question today or any comments, inshallah, I'll try to answer. Next week, we'll talk about the individual's roles in the society that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was building. And if there is any questions or comments now, I'll take that.